picture was started our education in filmmaking, and we made a good film, and the studios picked it up. It was incredible. That's what made it possible for us to raise the money for Force of Impulse. So from that day on, when I started my career in New York, I was headed in the direction of funding and producing and doing everything. You know, we all did. Probably like you guys do with your website. You know, you do everything yourself. And that's how I learned the film business.
But sadly, we're not 19.
What'd you say?
He said, sadly, we're not 19.
And we have no accolades as of yet. Hopefully it'll change tonight.
You learn. You have to learn. You have to crawl before you walk.
Yeah.
No matter what the hell you do.
Totally.
And that's the way we started. See, in those days, there was nobody supporting young filmmakers in America. It was, film schools were not like it is today. I mean, today you got a choice of the best schools in the world. But in those days, there was no film schools. There were theater schools. That's why I chose to go to Carnegie, which is one of the finest drama schools in America.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a teacher in those days like you have today.
Right.
You didn't make demonstration films like you can do today. None of that existed. So we were like virgins in the woods. And we had to go find the money ourselves to be able to do what we wanted to do.
When just looking at your history of your films and the films you produce, you seem to be pretty good at being able to round up money, for your films and projects. I mean, it was only after, 3 years after since Force of Impact came out, that you moved to Italy and started working in film there.
Well, you see, what happened is that I found this project called Wounds of Hunger, which was an award-winning bullfighting movie about a young kid and his best friend and what they go through to become bullfighters. And the people that I was working with, which was Saul Swimmer, the director, and then at that time also Alan Klein, who was becoming what I call the super manager because of all the incredible big acts that he was ultimately going to represent and did represent. And I got a chance to be a part of that. But when I found Wounds of Hunger, nobody could identify with it, because nobody understood it. And so that led me to go with somebody, an actor named Brett Talbot, who had worked with me in a picture called Pity Me Not with Saul Swimmer, which I had done after I did Force of Impulse. So we went to Europe. We raised half the money together in the U.S. and we went to Europe, and we made a co-production between Spain and Italy. And when I was shooting Wounds of Hunger in Europe, I couldn't believe it. Hollywood was all in Europe. I mean, no matter where you went, you saw the biggest stars, the biggest directors, the biggest writers, people from all different countries working in Spain and working in Italy, And it just seemed to me like that was the place I should be, because I said, if all these people are here, why do I want to go to Hollywood?
Totally.
Plus, I loved it over there. Making films in Europe as much, I don't know, it wasn't as pressure-packed as it is in America. You know what I mean? They would take chances with young people. They would nurture young directors and young writers, give them a shot. Whereas in America, you had to beat down the door with a sledgehammer, And I just love that ambience and the freedom of the way they made films. And that's why there were so many Americans over there also, besides everything else. And Alan Klein kept calling me, telling me, look, agents want to represent you in Hollywood. What do we do? And this and that. And then I told him, I said, well, I've decided I'm going to do this Wounds of Hunger. and it's going to be edited in Italy, and I'm going to move there, and I want to see if I can break into international films. And that's why I never went to Hollywood,
Ever.
Wow.
Wow.
You know, that started me on a direction, in the direction of do the films you want to do.
Yeah.
Be happy with what you're doing. And my first objective was to work in mainly artistic films. And I finally, you know, and at the same time, I had met some Americans who knew about me from the other films and wanted to form a company with me. And I made the deal with them, and then I searched out great Italian people, quality people, and I set up a production company in Italy. So after Wounds of Hunger was finished, which got picked up by MGM for the international markets, never played in the U.S. in the theaters, but it played all over Europe, which naturally helped me later. But so I started making artistic films, both co-producing, helping fund them, and if there were parts for me, I would act in them.
So you totally kept the integrity about it. Like even the parts, if there were parts for you, you only took it because you wanted to play that part, not because of any other driving factor.
No, what I did was I met a guy, producer, really quality, important producer in Hollywood, in Rome. And at the same time that I met him, because he had been working for many years with a famous producer named Franco Cristaldi, who was married to Claudia Cardinale. I don't know if you remember her. And he had decided to go on his own. This is about the same time that I had met these Americans and had formed this independent company. And so I said to him, I said, look, I want to do some quality pictures, not fully funded, films that are partially funded, but I'm also, looking for projects that I can star in. So the first two deals I made, there was a co-starring role for me. And I did very well with those pictures. The third one I did was with a film with Lena Wertmuller. Do you remember her? Swept Away, The Beautiful Families. She was nominated for Academy Award a few years ago for that.
Yes.
And that was a picture that was going to be not commercially, it was going to be supported by Fellini. So you see how one thing leads to another, and I just wanted to be involved with that picture. I didn't star in that film. I just was one of the co-producers.
Yeah.
So I was open to anything that I felt was quality, basically.
Wow.
But then what happened to me is that this Notriani comes to me with a huge musical to star Marcello Mastroianni. You remember him, don't you?
Yeah.
And it was the life of Rudolph Valentino. And I thought to myself, damn, that's something I got to be involved with.
Yeah, definitely.
And also Mastroianni had agreed if the play goes well in Italy that he would take it to New York. So I met with everybody and I told him about Alan Klein, who was this huge musical guy, and everybody knew about him by then. And I said I could help take this play to New York with Alan Klein. And with that, we went into production. And the play opened soft. And I called Klein and told him I didn't think it would work in the U.S. without being completely rewritten. But there was another problem, because the play was not going to go outside of Rome, that Mastroianni had decided to close the show. And with that, I told Klein, I said, that's it, Alan. I said, I'm going to now turn to something commercial. And he said to me, he said, well, keep your eyes open. If you ever have something that's good for the U.S., be sure to call me. And he also told me another thing. He said that he had become one of the largest stockholders of MGM and was very tight with the president of the company, which came back to haunt us later, which I'll get into. And I said, well, I'll call you, Alan. And with that, I closed my time of wanting to be in just, you know, these intellectual, high-quality pictures, and I wanted to find something commercial.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next step, which led to the Westerns. Am I getting ahead of you guys?
No, you're good. Actually, it's also interesting. I just want you to keep talking.
Well, you know, I'm leaving out a lot of things, so if I forget something, just remind me, because it's a long haul.
Before we jump into the Westerns, you talked about one of the first times, like your first day of shoot on a film, and how it was shooting a film in Europe was different from shooting a film in the U.S. Can you paint that picture for our listeners?
Well, imagine you getting off a plane in China, and you walk on a movie set to do a picture. It's just absolutely frightening. And the reason being, in Europe, you could be doing a picture with one actor speaking one language, another actor speaking another language. You're speaking your language. The director screaming in his language. The assistant director screaming in one language, another assistant director screaming in another language. So the first film I did, I was, you know, in the middle of a scene with a famous French actress named Annie Jardot, who was really a big star in those days. And I was really having trouble, man. I couldn't hit my, you know, I couldn't say the lines right. I was stammering around. They're all screaming in the background. The director's screaming like an animal. And finally, after 2-3 takes, the assistant who speaks English comes up to me and she asks me, well, what's wrong, Tony? And I said, you people, I don't know how you can make films like this. I mean, all this screaming and yelling and this and that. So she walked me aside with Jardot, and she says, look, this is the way we make films. We want you to be as natural as you can be. We care about a natural performance. We'll put the voice on the film when the film is edited. She says, what you have to do is you have to click out the background. Listen to her lines coming to you in English, even though she's speaking in French. And then when you finish the sequence, just click yourself back into reality, and it'll be fine. So that woman touched a nerve with me, because basically what she was saying to me is you've got to just completely block out everything, look at that actor, hear those words in your own language, and just respond. Talk and listen. So I learned that day how to cope with this problem of working with different nationalities, different languages, concentrating, and giving a solid performance. And that helped me throughout my career, for the 10 years or more that I lived and worked back and forth in Europe. But that's a very tough thing to do, and no school can prepare you for that. No experience can prepare you for that. It's just, they taught me how to concentrate.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
that
when you come to the Western, forget about it. Wind machines, and bandits screaming, and languages and screaming, and dust blowing all over you, gunshots, explosions. I mean, you just have to cut it. You just blank it out. Squint your eyes like Clint Eastwood and ride into the dust.
So, I guess ADR is really important in European films then?
Say that again?
I guess the dialogue replacement is really important in European films?
Oh, yeah.
Are they just constantly...
They edit the film with all that chaos, and then they bring in these directors who then bring in actors to audition, like for my voice. In Italian. I would put my own voice in English. And then they would try to match me to match my original voice or my performance to that voice. So it's a whole other production.
Wow.
Every line, every sound, everything is recreated. But you see, that's part of what happened with the Italian Western. That building those soundtracks for dialogue, sound effects, everything, from top to bottom, was this, which was the backbone of the Italian Western, which then began to influence the American filmmakers and how they do soundtracks today, and they do, you know, Foley in the studio, footsteps, explosion, everything. That's all was really started from the Italian Western, Sergio Leone.
Wow.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing.
And it all really began with the soundtrack of the dialogue.
Wow.
So did they do that so it would have a bigger market worldwide, or that's just the way they did it?
No, their style of making films, the soundtrack was secondary.
Yeah.
They used it as a guide track, period.
Oh, man.
Wow.
And like when I'd go in the studio to lay down my voice, I would be hearing that dirty, ridiculous soundtrack, which is just a guide track. So they would clean everything up and redo it.
Oh, so basically
they didn't like
everything
an
was done in
actor's voice
post.
in reality. Like those directors, they didn't care if they found a face they liked and they were natural. They didn't care what they sound like. They'd fix it in the dubbing room.
Wow. So there were no.
Fellini was like that. Fellini would take people off the street, just the way they looked, and tell them to count to 10, and then he'd put the dialogue in.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing.
It's a whole style, and that style led to the special effects world. I mean, those guys in those days, nothing in those westerns that I made, and I made a bunch of them all over the world, and none of those sounds in any of those pictures is from the actual set.
Wow.
They're all manufactured. Like
Well, I think that's part of the draw for a lot of people with spaghetti westerns, because I was rewatching Coming at You today, and it was some of the scenes like with the clicking the clock, you know, that's going off in the room during one of the fight scenes, and the just the sounds of the wind.
About what you saw on our website?
Do what?
Are you talking about pieces of the promos on the website?
No, I'm just talking about the copy that I have.
What do you have? That bad rhino?
Yeah,
he has the bad one.
Yeah,
which we'll get into here in a minute.
But in that movie and a lot of spaghetti westerns, I think part of the draw, at least for me, is the exaggerated sounds, because I'm obsessed with sound. But yeah, it's really odd. It's almost surreal in a way.
Yeah, and what happened was, if you go back to Star Wars, the original, okay, and when Lucas formed his sound company, and when he insisted about, if you want to play Star Wars, you got to put Dolby sound in your theaters. Don't forget, before Star Wars, there was very little Dolby. Some of your best theaters had Dolby, but the whole world was resisting spending the money. You know how theaters are. They don't want to spend a dime. And he forced through the beginning of the Dolby explosion in the world. And that's because he built all that sound on Star Wars like Sergio Leone did in creating the Italian Western.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at that picture and just close your eyes and listen to the sound, it's a music track of its own, just like the Italian Westerns were.
Oh, wow.
And then you're right, that was a big part of these pictures working, and now you see it. I mean, did you see Avatar?
Yep.
Yeah.
Every sound is manufactured. Not
Oh, yeah.
every sound, but everything is constructed constructed in that world.
Yep.
And when you look at it that way, it's pretty fun. You know.
Oh, it's a fun
pretty
job.
Fantastic.
There's nothing better than making
well,
sound
it's
effects.
certainly, I'll tell you, it's certainly interesting filmmaking.
Yeah.
Because anything is possible, like the computer's done today, like what I've been going through with Coming At You. I mean, you cannot believe it when I get into that. I mean, what we had to overcome and what Cameron had to overcome to make that film Avatar, and why it took him so many years. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
it's just everything you do in the 3D world is new. Nobody knows how to do it.
Yeah.
They have to be taught how to do it. That's the way it was when I made Coming At You, which we'll get into later. Anyway, I'm getting off the track. You guys got to keep guiding me.
No, it's all right. No, it's so interesting. Since we are talking about the westerns, you are known for your roles in the spaghetti westerns. Can you explain to the listeners exactly what a spaghetti western is how that term comes about, and how did you become a part of that genre?
Well, after I had decided, after the Ciao Rudy closed, the Italian spaghetti western was exploding, and I was there to witness that explosion, and I couldn't believe what when I'd go in the theater, it was like they were going crazy. The audience reaction, they were reacting to everything. And I saw this explode in Rome, and I thought to myself, this is something I got to do. I got to do one of these to take it back to America. And you see, I got lucky because America didn't buy a fistful of dollars for a few dollars more and the good, bad, and the ugly till later. Nobody distributed in the U.S. Eastwood's first two pictures.
Oh, wow.
So I was living in Europe at that time when I'm seeing this thing exploding country by country by country by country. But they were, in America, they weren't sure this kind of picture would work in America. Now that turned out to work in my favor.
Yeah.
But I pushed forward. I found a story, and then I met some Italians, and I met who I was introduced to a very sophisticated director, and I started working on my first Italian Western as this explosion had still not hit America, but had exploded in the international markets. Anyway, I don't know why I got on that track.
That's fine.
No, you're just pretty much how you became a part of it all. I mean,
well, what happened was I found this story. I called Alan Klein now, who's the super manager, Rolling Stones. He's got half of all the rock and roll superstars out of England, including the Rolling Stones.
Wow.
And I call him and tell him I found this Western. He starts to laugh on the phone. Tony Anthony, a cowboy, you know. Well, I said, Alan, you didn't laugh when I told you I was going to be a bullfighter. And he laughed again, and then we made sort of a deal that he would buy the picture if he liked it for America. And I didn't know if he was going to like it or not, and MGM wouldn't make a deal up front on it because they said they had to see the picture, because you got to remember, still, the Eastwood films hadn't opened in America, except United Artists now has picked them up for distribution. And that's part of what happened with Alan Klein when I called him. He says, my timing might be just right because they're getting ready to launch the Sergio Leone films. Well, when I went back to the Italians and I said, well, Alan Klein, they all loved that. They all loved he's going to talk to MGM, everything else. But when he sent me the telegram accepting to do the deal based on him seeing the film, they said, well, this is not a deal. This is an option. And I act like it was nothing. I said, listen, he'll like the film. Don't worry about it, and he'll deliver MGM. Well, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
So I put up $20,000 of my own money, and this producer put up $20,000, and we signed notes for over $150,000, and that's how we made the film.
Wow.
And a very interesting thing happened when we made the film, because we didn't have any money, so we developed only one shot a day in color, and the rest of this picture was developed in black and white to save money. Which is another connection to what I've done to Coming At You, which we'll get into later.
Okay.
And when I had to show the film to Klein, he comes there with his entourage on the way to London, including he has with him Saul Swimmer, who I had to work with in all those other pictures, who is now preparing films for Klein and his clients. And they come in the screening room, and the first scene comes up, and they start laughing. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is a disaster. And I go outside and I start smoking, and the Italian producer comes out. He says, Tony, they're laughing at everything. He said, I don't understand it. I said, yeah, well, I hope they're not laughing themselves out of the deal. So I go back into the theater there where we're projecting, and in the end, when I start sneaking around, like this director kept telling me that this character, what he wanted to do with me as a stranger, which I thought he was crazy, naturally. As I start sneaking around shooting these bad guys, they're laughing at every gag that we did. And I'm saying, oh my God. Well, when the screening was over, Klein comes up to me, throws his arms around me. He says, Tony, that picture is hilarious, and it's fantastic. The audience, when you're half dead, they beat you up and you're crawling across the dungeon floor, and you stop in the middle, half dead, and go back and get your hat. He said, I almost fell out of my chair. He said, the audience is going to rip the seats out of the theater. And I thought to myself, well, I'm glad you liked it, Alan. I had no idea.
Wow.
And Fonzie constantly kept telling me when we were doing that picture, you're a bad guy, but you do good in spite of yourself. You're not Gary Cooper. You're not John Wayne. You're not the tall in the saddle cowboy. You're the street guy. The audience will identify with you because you look like a guy that goes in the movie theater and says, well, I could be like him. And every time I fought him on the set about something, he kept pushing me, and I got to tell you, he was right. And the audience, when the picture opened, I couldn't believe it either. I'd go up into the top of the balcony, full theater, and they're laughing at everything. And it was the character. It was the way they constructed me, this dirty coal mining cowboy. So I was going in a completely different direction than say, the Eastwoods were going, and Bronson was going, and Van Cleef was going. And they were making me like a regular street guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to this gallant, tall in the saddle, good-looking blonde, that kind of guy. And that was the Italian fantasy. Those guys over there, they made those Italian westerns like we used to play cowboys and Indians when we were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
talking about that scene that Klein said he almost fell out of the chair. When we got to that scene and shooting it, I had a big fight with Fonzie. I said, Gigi, I'm not going back. I'm half dead. I'm crawling out of this dungeon. I'm not going to stop and go back and get my hat. And we had a big fight, and so the producer comes on the set, the Italian. He says, Tony, he's right. And then he says, look, you're American. You should know that a cowboy has a security blanket.
Yeah.
The first is his horse. The second is his hat.
Nice.
And third, it's his gun. And I looked at him and
and I said, geez, let's cut the bullshit. Let's just shoot the scene. And he trapped me, see, because I knew I couldn't cut it later because it was one shot, and I always had that hat on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when the picture hit, and every one of those things that he did with me was like, and he would act it out like a kid.
Wow.
And that's the way Leone was. Leone, they said, I didn't work with Leone, but I heard all the stories because I used all his people, on all those other westerns I made. And he would just go through it and act out all the parts like a kid, because they all loved westerns when they were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they put that fantasy and that style into their market of that day and made it connect with the audience. So that was exaggeration, basically.
Yeah.
I think it's
That's the
fascinating.
way all these special effects movies that they bombard us with today, they're all exaggeration. Starting with Die Hard, all those films.
Mhm.
Die Hard, definitely.
Over the top exaggeration. That all came from the Italian Western, of which they made over 700 films. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
That's
700 films.
Wow.
When I was shooting those pictures, it was hilarious. We'd arrive in Almeria, Spain, and we'd be in one hotel, and there'd be 6 other films shooting. And when you get in your car in the morning to go to the set, they had signs up with arrows pointing to, the title of each film in different places.
Wow.
Did anybody ever walk onto the wrong set?
Oh, constantly.
Right.
When I did Stranger in Town, you know where we shot the exteriors? Because we didn't have any money to go to Spain.
Where's that?
We shot it outside of Rome by the airport in a rock quarry, where they dig gravel.
Nice.
So we'd be down in there shooting, and a bulldozer would come in front of the camera.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and we're disguising this shot to that shot. Like a lot about one of the famous stories of Sergio Leone is, when he made Fistful of Dollars, he had no money.
Yeah.
I mean, they paid Clint Eastwood, I think, $10,000. And the reason that he developed those extreme close-ups was he was blocking out that he didn't have sets and things behind.
I was always wondering about that.
So he was filling the screen with the actor's eyes and the rim of his hat to block out so you wouldn't see the background.
That's
and out
amazing.
Of that,
That's awesome.
He created that style of using the extreme close-ups,
And
Yeah.
and those are the most the scenes you think of when you think of Italian
Spaghetti
westerns.
Western, yeah.
You,
Yeah,
you
always
think of the
that.
eyes and the hats and the long silent standoffs.
Well, also the other thing Leone did, which I did with my pictures, he would go to Morricone, who did all his westerns, and he would get the themes that he wanted. They would agree before they made the picture, and he would use the playback on the set. And that's what I used to do. I'd go, like, when I worked with Savina on Coming At You, we agreed on what the soundtrack was going to be before.
Oh, wow.
So on the set, we had playback. So during the rehearsals, we would use the playback.
Oh, nice.
So
And
that way-
we would always have laughs because the guys would mix in Sergio Leone music with our music, with the chorus, and
Right.
it was really wild.
So it just kind of gets the vibe
You see,
going
that
for all
kind
the
of
actors.
looseness and everything and chaos is part of why those pictures worked. But anyway, they made 700, if you can believe that.
Insane.
That's crazy.
So I mentioned at the top of the show that I watched spaghetti westerns with my dad while growing up, and we watched The Stranger Returns. But at the time, I had no idea it was a trilogy. There were so many. You did so many, 2 other films, including that it included The Stranger.
Well, see, what happened with that was Klein buys the picture. MGM puts it out. It opens in Chicago and paid for itself in one theater. It was a huge hit out there. Then it goes to Detroit. No, wait a minute. I'm getting in front of myself. When Klein came to
Rome to buy Stranger in Town. He after the showing, he said, "Can you guys be in London on the weekend?" And Infascelli said, "Well, of course, you know." Because he was a nervous wreck, the Italian, because we had to pay all these people. We had no money. We needed that $250,000 from Klein.
Yeah.
So he says, "You got a deal. I love the picture. It's going to do tremendous in America. I hope it does the same for you in the international markets." I go to London with Infascelli. I get to London, and we got there on a Friday night. So Alan wants to see me for dinner that night, not with Infascelli. So I go with him to dinner. And this guy was a king. He would go to the Hilton Hotel in London. He'd take 3 suites, connecting suites. And he would have all his meetings with everybody, including the Stones, Herman's Hermits, all these famous Donovans, you know, everybody he was representing, and have meetings with everybody in a coffee shop at the Hilton Hotel. It was absolute chaos. And then upstairs, back and forth, one room had a lawyer, another room was the secretary, another room was other people, A&R people. So I get there, and we go out to dinner, and at dinner, he's talking about and laughing about the picture and this and that. That's when he came up with the idea to call it Stranger in Town. No, he said Stranger in the Night, like the Frank Sinatra song.
Yeah.
That's what he said. Get that? There's the title, Stranger in the Night, which later became Stranger in Town. So at that dinner, he says to me, I almost fell off the chair, he says, "I want you to go make another one of these pictures, a sequel, as quickly as you can." I said, "As quickly as I can?" He says, "Yeah, I want a second Stranger." I said, "You mean you want to make a deal to make another picture right away?" He says, "Yeah, but this time I'll put up money during the shooting. You won't have to wait until I accept the picture at the end. I accept the picture in the front. Same character, just refine him a little bit more. You know now what the humor, what you need. Same director, same writers. How soon can you make me another picture?" I said, "Jesus, Alan," I said, "well, if I can get the script done in 30 days, I can deliver another picture in 90, 120 days. He says, "Fantastic." He says, "Now you go talk to Infascelli. If he's not interested, we'll find somebody else." So I go back to the hotel, and I see this Italian producer who's an absolute nervous wreck because he needs this money to pay the people. I mean, he was chain smoking and drinking wine. I mean, we had to get that check. You know what I mean? So I tell him Klein wants us to make another picture right away. He drops his glass. He says, "What? He hasn't even paid us for the first one." I said, "PQ, he's going to pay us tomorrow. He wants another picture, for Christ's sake." He said, "I can't believe this is happening." I said, "Well, it's happened." So we went to London to collect the check and make the deal for the U.S. and left there with a contract to make a second picture.
Nice.
That was the brilliance of Alan Klein. He saw United Artists getting ready to launch all 3 of those Eastwood films, one after the other. And he wanted to do the same thing with The Stranger.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
I read in a couple of places that MGM didn't give the film the attention it deserved, or the distribution. It actually sat on the film for what I've read was 7 years. Is that true?
No, that's the third one.
That's the third one?
If you want to jump to that one, then. Well, let's just jump to that one. So I do the first one. I deliver the second one as they're finishing the ad campaign. Now, if you can imagine, here's this guy from Italy, hasn't worked in America for a number of years, and I walk down Times Square, and there's a signboard of The Stranger. They're getting ready to launch The Stranger. Okay. I show the picture. Klein doesn't come to Rome. I bring the picture to New York, The Silent Stranger. They show it to MGM, and MGM loves it. We're going to go out with it right after the Stranger in Town. At the same time, Klein makes another deal for me to do another picture with the same director, and I had a story about this sailor in the Second World War stranded on an island with an English teacher with 12 kids. So I go to Jamaica with the director, and that's when Stranger in Town opened and exploded in Chicago.
Wow.
I'm scouting locations, and all at once I'm out in the middle of the island, and they come to me that Alan Klein has been searching, calling me all day. You must call New York. I call New York, and he says to me, you got to get on a plane and come back here. I said, Alan, I got another 4 days of location so I can wrap this up. He says, forget about that. You got to come back here. MGM wants another Stranger.
Nice.
I said, what? They want another Stranger. Stranger in Town is exploding. They're already preparing the promos for Stranger Returns. They're working on the ads already. O'Brien wants another Stranger. Do you have a story? I said, well, I think I do. I said, I'll have something for you when I get there. I said, when do you want me here? He says, tomorrow. We need to go have a meeting.
Wow.
So I said, Alan, I'm in the middle of the island. I got to get back to Kingston. I got to either get to Kingston or someplace where I can catch a plane. He said, I'll send a helicopter for you. I mean, he was really urgent.
Yeah.
So I go to Vansi, and I have a girl with me. Her name's Luciana Paluzzi, who I used to go out with in those days. Made 2 or 3 pictures with her. And I had visited her when she was shooting the film after she did the James Bond picture, Thunderball. I had visited her in Japan, and I was bored during the day. Well, you know, because there's nothing worse than hanging out on a set when a film's being made. And I used to wander around the studio there and watching them doing these samurai movies. And I always thought to myself, that would be interesting, a cowboy up against those samurais. Even though it didn't make any sense, you know, time-wise.
Yeah.
So anyway, I go to Vansi. I said, we got to go to New York. He said, why are we going to? I said, you're not going to believe it. MGM wants another Stranger. That means you and me again. You as director, me as actor. Klein says we got to get there tomorrow. He's sending the helicopter for us in the morning to get us to Kingston. He said, well, what are we going to say to them? I said, I don't know. So I talked to Luciana, because I had told Luciana about that idea, and she thought it was great, because we used to laugh watching those people doing those samurai, you know, how they did the fight scenes, and it was really fun to watch that. And I'd always been a fan of Kurosawa and all the samurai movies. So as we're flying up there, I tell Vansi my idea. The Stranger goes to Japan. Same story. He's going for money. And ends up like a stranger in a strange land. Well, first of all, he thought it was a hilarious idea. You know, how is a cowboy going to function in Japan?
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I get to New York, I got the story worked out in my mind, how to make it work. We go into MGM. Bob O'Brien comes in. He says to me, Tony, Stranger in Town has paid for itself already before it opens in New York. And it's just getting ready to open in New York. And he says, we need one more Stranger. Just like the Eastwood, they did 3, we need 3. You got any ideas? Well, I told Klein this idea on my way up, but just, you know, I didn't really pitch him. I just told him I had an idea about samurais and cowboys, you know, in Japan. So I go into my pitch, and Bob O'Brien looks at me. Now, this is the CEO of the company. He starts laughing. He said, that's a fantastic idea. And that Japanese market is huge. And he picks up the phone. He calls a guy named Red Silverstein, who was the head of all international there. He calls him in. He says, Tony, tell Red your idea for the third stranger. And I tell him the idea. Guys, I'm telling you, within 10 minutes when I finished that spiel, we had a deal fully funded by MGM.
Wow. Wow.
So there I am at the Warwick Hotel in New York. Fonzie says, I got to call Antonioni, who was a famous director in Italy. I got to get some young writers in here. So I go to Klein. I said, we got to bring 2 writers in from Italy. Fine, bring them in. MGM will pay for it. And I got to be able to see 15 samurai movies. Just tell my office. They'll set up the screenings. Okay. So Vanzi and I, with these writers, come in from Italy. We go in and we look at all these films, and Vanzi's incredible. He's making ideas from everything, you know. So we come up with the first draft of the script within 20 days in New York. Write it in the hotel there. Room service, around the clock. And I'm on the plane to go to Japan within 60 days from me coming back from Jamaica.
Wow.
That's how that picture has happened.
That's crazy.
Now, fade out, fade in. Toughest picture in my career. We got hit by 13 typhoons. Tear down the sets, build them back again, tear them down again. It was a nightmare.
Wow.
I ended up shooting 3/4 of the film at night because of the rain would come and then it would go away. It was brutal. But I finished the picture. When I get back to New York, first I get a call from Saul Swimmer, who just finished a picture that I helped him set up for Klein in London called Mrs. Brown, You Have a Lovely Daughter with Herman's Hermits. Swimmer calls me, he says, Tony, there's a problem. There's a management fight going on at MGM. Klein's defending Bob O'Brien, and he's going against the people that are trying to take over MGM. I said, well, does that affect us here? He said, I don't know, but it doesn't look good because they're out to get MGM. It's one of those power plays in Hollywood when they take over studios. And Bob O'Brien, they were trying to get rid of and replace him. I don't remember who replaced him at this point. I know, but I don't remember. I get back to New York with Silent Stranger. We screen the picture. Everybody loves the picture. At the same time, in the background, there's a tremendous fight going on for the power of owning MGM. Swimmer's picture, Mrs. Brown, opens, and MGM doesn't push it. Klein gets mad. Well, what happened was new management got control of the stock. Bob O'Brien was on his way out. Klein ends up in lawsuits with everybody because they say hands off of Alan Klein because Alan Klein was supporting Bob O'Brien. So there you are. Tony Anthony and the Stranger is caught in the middle of a power struggle at the studio. And that's why The Silent Stranger sat on the shelf for 7 years.
Wow.
And then people tried to buy it, and another regime came in, and they went in and they re-edited and ruined the picture, took out all the humor, made me come to Hollywood and put this stupid narration over it, which was just awful. And that picture was completely wasted. And that finished the relationship with MGM. So I was a victim of a power play for the control of MGM.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's sad.
That's a pretty interesting story.
It is. It really is. Let's fast forward real quick to 1981 and talk about a film that you wrote, produced, and starred in. Not to mention you also designed a low-cost 3D projection lens for the film. But before we go into all that detail, just kind of tell the listeners what coming at you is and why you wanted to do a 3D movie, because I'm sure it was a financial risk to do a 3D movie when not any other 3D movies was being made.
Well, it's an interesting story. Here's what happened. I had been involved with a foreign sales guy by the name of Arthur Herskovitz, who before was a partner with another, which is probably the first biggest international salesperson in America. His name was Bob Myers. Now that name is, both those names are important to tell this 3D story. One day, and Arthur was a specialist. I had met him because he was with MGM when I had made The Silent Stranger. And he had since then become a major independent, and his specialty was, and he was the guy, when I met him, he was MGM's representative in Japan. He spoke fluent Japanese, Chinese. He was a specialist in the Far East. And we became great friends, he and Bob Myers. So one day, I get a call. They want me to do a Western in Taiwan, putting me together with the kid that they were grooming to replace Bruce Lee, who had died.
Wow.
And they were doing it in 3D. And Arthur had been in Taiwan and seen some of the footage. So he said to me, he said, "Did you like 3D?" I said, "Well, you know, I used to go to 3D when I was in college. We would, you know, we'd have a few beers and go watch 3D at midnight shows." And I said, I remember seeing the 2 Warhol movies, but yeah, you know, I like 3D, but you know, nobody's done 3D in 100 years. And he says, "Tony, I saw the most astounding 3D that I've ever seen right there in Taiwan. And they want to put that character of you, not exactly the stranger, but bring you into historic China." So I thought to myself, 3D, that's a take. And he said, "Yep, even though it's in 3D, it'll also be in 2D, flat, which means it would get worldwide release. But he thought it would be phenomenal in 3D. And he was going to buy a picture that they were making to sell in the U.S. based on the footage he saw." So I said, "Look," I said, "I'm interested because I love the Far East, and I know that this Western character can work in China because after the Japanese experience, we can make it terrific. But I tell you what, tell him I want a plane ticket for me and the director, because the director that I did Blind Man with, which I had a big hit with." And I said, "Tell him I want a ticket, and I'll come over to talk to them." So they sent the tickets. I called Baldi in Italy, and I said, "We're going to China. They want to talk to me about a Western character in China, like I did with Vansi in Japan." So he was thrilled. He'd never been to the Far East, so he, you know, I joined him in Italy, and we flew together to Taiwan. We get it to Taiwan, and it's Chinese New Year, like it is now. Everything's closed. And so this producer takes me to this dilapidated little studio and puts up this footage, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Things flying off the screen, and it's beautiful color. I mean, it was really impressive. The next day, when the theaters opened after Chinese New Year, he takes us to a theater he owns, and the theater's stacked to the ceiling with this picture, and the audience is going crazy. I thought to myself, I can't believe what I'm seeing here. Because, and this gets back to how we make Coming At You, because I'd seen all those old 3D movies, maybe one thing would fly off the screen and another thing would fly in another place. And it was eye strain, you know how it was.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there with Baldy. I'm saying, Freddie Nando, we got to make an Italian Western with this. Even though the Italian Western era is over, if we can transform this into that kind of film, we can really do something special. He said, I agree with you, Tommy. So I turned down that picture. We go back to Rome and we decide we're going to make a 3D Italian Western. That's how it started.
That's how Coming At You was born.
Yeah.
That's interesting because when I saw some of the scenes with like the spears being thrown, I immediately thought, wow, that looks like a martial arts movie. Just the way they come, and it's just interesting that the idea, came while in China.
Well, here's what happened after that, which is another epic. I go to try to find equipment that can make a film in the 80s, not a film that was made in the 50s. Okay?
Yeah.
And as far as equipment, everybody in England, in New York, I found equipment in Chicago, Los Angeles. I tested everything. And all these filming devices, and this is what Cameron went through on Avatar, except he had $200 million. I had no money. I found one camera that did one thing, another camera that did another thing, another camera that did another thing, and all the cameras had problems. And all the projection devices were nightmares. So I finally decided if I'm going to make a 3D movie, first of all, I know already from the testing that I've done, they don't have an 18. An 18's a wide-angle lens. And we knew, Baldy and I, from the tests we did, that we needed an 18 to get that off the front wall as much as we wanted to do with it. So I had to pick a piece of equipment, and with our own money, refine the equipment to make the movie. That's how bad it was.
Wow.
Which is exactly what Cameron's just gone through. He worked for 5 years. He tried every system, fixing every system, making every system, designing the programs. He had to do all that. That didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was the same way when I was in the 80s. They did not have the tools to make a film for the 80s. They had tools to make a film for the 50s. So anyway, we spent all this money. We picked a system. I think I'm okay. I take a chance because I've now got the commitment for the money to make the film. Klein wouldn't make the film with me. I made 7 westerns with him, but he would not make it. He loved the idea of 3D. He said, but the problem is how you're going to distribute it. That's what I'm worried about. He said, I know you'll get through the making of it, but how's it going to get distributed? I said, I'm not going to worry about that, Alan. It happened before, and it'll happen again if the picture delivers. Well, he wouldn't come in. So I had found some people, and I found the money. But it was very low budget, okay? I go to Spain. I bring the actress from New York. I bring the director. I bring the camera crew out of Italy. I bring the system out of New York. I bring special effects people, because you got to train them. They don't know anything about 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And we started. And I had a silver screen shipped to Italy. Put it in the studio there, so I could have everything under control as we tried to make a 3D movie. Now, don't forget, nobody around that, including the guy that owned that camera, knew anything about making 3D movies.
Yeah.
So we started. And we started getting some pretty good stuff. But it wasn't working.
Yeah, because with shooting 3D movies, just because I have some low-end 3D cameras here, and when I just shoot, you know, like when I go on tour or whatever, you have to think of it in a completely different perspective on it, because you can. It's not like shooting in 2D where you can just shoot it and you have what you shoot. With 3D, you actually have to think what's going to be functional, how's the depth going to affect, how this is going to affect the viewer. And
what you have to have, so you understand, first of all, you got a left eye and a right eye. When you look at an object, your eyes converge, and that's why you see depth. That's what 3D is. It's a dimensional viewing. That's how we see in real life. Now, with a regular filming camera, you have lenses, different focal length lenses, and I don't want to get too technical because our audience won't be able to follow me. But you put the lens on and you shoot it, and you draw focus. Well, with 3D, you got another problem. You got two eyes converging on an object. And that's why when Hitchcock made Dial M for Murder, he had to shoot the whole film practically using the 50-millimeter lens. That's like making a film with one lens.
yeah,
Well, to shoot a film today, like Avatar was done, and like we did in the 80s, we were the first to do it. They didn't have the tools. They didn't have the lenses. They didn't have the focus mechanism. They didn't have control on the convergence of the left eye and the right eye. That's the problem when you have these cheap cameras. They're not technically perfect for shooting in 3D. So it's more than just your concept of what you're shooting. It's what will that equipment do?
yeah,
And that was the problem that I was having in Spain with 25 people in a hotel, and I'm paying the bills. And it wasn't working. I would have distortion in the left eye, which meant the image was coming into the camera okay for the right eye, but it was curving on the left eye. So what do you have? You got a blurred image in the middle of your shot. And it was an optical problem, and I couldn't solve it there until finally I was so disgusted, and I lost over $300,000. I'm telling you guys the truth. And I was so disgusted, I had to send everybody home. And then I stayed there to pay off all the bills, because I said, if I ever want to come back to Spain, I can't just get on a plane and leave these debts behind.
yeah,
So I sold my stocks and I did everything, and I said, that's it. Paid everybody off, and I said, I'm finished with the movie business. I was so disgusted. Because there was nobody you could go to except people that didn't know what the hell they were talking about. See? That everybody was a specialist, but none of them knew what the hell they were talking about.
yeah,
I decided to quit the movie business. And I go back to Washington. My brother Roger and my other brother getting ready to open a restaurant. I told Roger, I said, Rog, I busted out. I'm getting out of the business. Can I come stay with you till I get my head clear? He said, come on, come down here. You'll be all right. And I go to Washington, D.C. with the thought that I will never work in the movie business again. I was so upset about that, you know. And when I was there, I met a guy named Marshall Lupo, who was also from West Virginia. Great guy, who used to be an executive at Xerox. He had left Xerox and became partners with another guy who was an executive at Xerox. His
His name was Gene Quintano. Gene had written a novel. He had aspirations of being in the film business. Lupo was a great fan of the movies, and he knew everything about me, being from close to where I was born, and a very good friend of my brother's. So he and Quintano start telling me, Tony, why don't we go make this 3D movie? We can raise the money in the Washington area. I said, guys, don't talk to me about 3D. I just lost over $300,000. You got to fix the cameras. There's a lot of problems. They said, well, anyway, they kept after me and after me. Finally, at Christmas, I said to Quintano, I said, you really think we can raise this money? He said, Tony, we know people. You know people in Hollywood. We'll get the money. Let's go see what you did. But when I came back from Spain, I took my footage and I put it in a vault in New York. I didn't even show it to anybody. So I said, well, give me one day to go to New York, put the footage together, and get that stupid idiot that we had with us to set up a screening so we can look at it. So I went to New York and edited in pieces. I cut it down to about a 3-minute presentation, put some music behind it. And they came in, and they went nuts when they saw it. They said, this is incredible. I said, yeah, because I cut out the bad pieces because of the imperfection in the equipment that has to be corrected. Don't worry about that. We can raise the money with this footage. So we made a deal. And we took that footage, and the funny thing was we needed money, and Gene Quintano, he was a horse player and a gambler. So we bet $5,000 on the Lakers, and it was a blowout. We won the $5,000, and that $5,000 started Marshall, Gene, and I to go raise the money.
Wow.
Which it took us 4 months. And another ironic thing that happened in the middle of that, I was very good friends with the head of production at Universal, who wanted to buy Blind Man, and then Universal offered me a 3-picture deal one time, which is one of the biggest mistakes of my career, which I'll tell you about at another time. But I call Ned Tannen, he's in New York. He comes to see the footage. He goes crazy. He said, I want you guys to be in Los Angeles next week. So he pays for me, Quintano, and Lupo, and the 3D technician. We go to Hollywood. They put up a silver screen in their big theater on the lot, fills it up with distribution and publicity and all, full house. And the people start yelling when some of the things come off the screen. But when the screening's over, Tannen gets up and he says, well, does anybody have anything to say? So one guy gets up and says, well, there's no doubt. Best 3D I've ever seen. I never saw things fly off the screen like that. Then he turned around and yelled at all the other people. He said, well, did you see the stuff come off the screen? Did you like the 3D? And people went, yeah. So Tannen says to me, okay, you guys go back to New York. Let me do my thing here. He wanted to make the picture. A week later, he calls me. He says, Tony, I can't convince distribution. They're just boggled with the idea of how I would distribute this, because there's no silver screens in America. They have to be put in. If you don't make the most incredible film, it'll never see the day. I can't get my people to go with it. So Universal turned me down. That led to us raising the money. So that footage that I shot, see, I was learning from the footage how to make the film. So that between rebuilding the camera, the testing, I'm now educating myself optically, and
learning how to make a 3D film and learning with this director how to teach the effects people to do what we need them to do, because nobody had ever done it. So that's how Coming At You finally then got made. We went to Spain, we raised the money, we raised all the money independently. Lupo and Quintana were amazing. Gene acted in the film with me, and Lupo stayed behind, kept raising money when we got into trouble all the way to the end. We got the film finished, which was a nightmare, and Herskovitz takes us to the first American film market. We go to the film market, they put up a silver screen in Westwood. You guys know Westwood?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the best theaters are, you know. After the second day, we became the hit of the American film market, and students from UCLA are trying to get into the theater, but you know, at the film market, the theater's not open to the public.
Yeah.
But the word goes out about this unbelievable 3D, and the audience is screaming and laughing and yelling like at a live show.
Wow.
That was our concept. Anyway, that's how Coming At You got picked up, and guess who was the president of Orion Filmways? Bob Myers, who was Arthur Herskovitz's partner when I was told about doing a 3D picture.
Wow.
And then we got lucky. They take the picture. So now we got the first picture distributed by a major studio in 25, 30 years, or how many years it is. And they have a picture called Blowout, with John Travolta.
Oh, yeah.
Which was their big summer movie. Now, in the meantime, they had done the trailers and they had done the posters, but we didn't know when we were going to open. So the first thing they did was, at the same time that they're previewing Blowout, we go to at that time, they had a theater convention. One of the big ones was in Kansas City. So they go out there and they put a silver screen in this big theater, and they throw a Western party on a Western town of amusement park, and they fill the theater up with the exhibitors. And by the time the titles of the film is over, we got them. They're laughing and carrying on. That picture was amazing because people would laugh and talk, and then they would scream with the effects, and I mean, it was like a live show.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So now Orion's all excited, but we still don't know when we're going to open because there's no silver screens. Anyway, Blowout opens. Their big hope for their big grossing summer movie, the end of the summer. No, summer. Dies. Complete dies.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm sitting, I don't know where the hell I was. I think I was in New York. I get a call from Bob Myers. Tony, the picture opened in Phoenix. It's an explosion. We broke Star Wars' record, and CBS sent cameras out there and put us on national news. We're going to be on national news tonight. I says, you're kidding. He said, no. And the critics hated the picture.
Yeah.
I said, what's that tell you? So all at once, we exploded.
Wow.
Tony, you got to go on a tour. What do you mean go on a tour? You got to go one way, Quintano got to go another way. He's on the West Coast, you're on the East Coast. You guys, we got to set up a publicity tour across the country as the picture pans out. The theaters are buying the silver screens. So I got to get on a plane in one direction. Quintana goes in another direction. Lupo's handling everything back on the East Coast. And Coming At You in less than 200 theaters drew over 5 million admissions.
Wow.
Wow.
Congratulations.
And the stupid thing was, was that that little picture paid for all those bad projection lenses and those bad glasses. And I was really disgusted about that because that cost us a fortune. In other words, they would rent these antique projection lenses for the theaters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the cost would come off the top, which means coming at you is paying for it.
Yeah.
The glasses, the same thing. Coming at you is paying for it. So that's cutting down our, what we call box office net film rentals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in other words, the picture did close to $17 million at the box office, but there was probably $3 million off of that came off the top to pay, lenses, glasses, shipping. That cuts down the split between the theater and the distributor. You understand that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when I did the second 3D movie, I decided, because I went to Aeroflex to rebuild another system that I found, because I wanted to go beyond what we did with Coming At You. And when I met there a guy by the name of Stan Loth, who was their head of R&D, who was a famous DP from Poland, that they helped to escape from Poland to come to work for Aeroflex in America. And we became good friends, and I'm educating him on 3D, and they're rebuilding this other camera, and we're paying for it. So now I've rebuilt 2 cameras and don't own them. But that's when I decided to R&D a 3D lens, a projection lens. And that was to have a completely optical system that would adapt to any size theater. And that's what we did. During the making of the picture, we got a patent, and I started a company, and we sold $1 million worth of lenses up through the time that Jaws 3D opened.
Wow. So the lens that, when you saw Jaws 3D, was the lens that you're talking about now that kind of helped, they hit?
No, what happened with Jaws 3D, well, that's another funny story. Ned Tannen calls me and wants me to come out and give him a hand on Jaws 3D, and I turned him down, because he turned me down on Coming At You.
Yeah.
But he came to one of those screenings at the film market, and he apologized to me in the parking lot. And I said, Ned, you're the head of production. You could have made this picture happen. We were only looking for $700,000-$800,000. And then he has the guts to call me because they were having trouble because they weren't able to get things to come off the screen. They got all these same guys in Hollywood that say they're the geniuses, and none of them knew what the hell they were doing. And so after Coming At You, none of those pictures could even touch what we did.
Yeah.
Those pictures were mostly distributed in flat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's after I made Treasure of the Four Crowns, and 3D was over.
Yeah.
I decided that's it. I'm not acting anymore. I was finished with it. I haven't acted since I did that movie. I just turned down everything and just went off to do my own things, to produce things. And that led me into a very other interesting part of my life until this new ordeal of Coming At You Noir 3D.
Well, we should definitely move in that direction. First, I just want to say that 3D, you saying that people were laughing and have a good time, I can totally understand that, because there's a scene in Coming At You where
I bet I know what you're talking about. The wash tub.
Where there's a baby in the wash tub, and the woman's setting the baby down in the tub. And I can just totally imagine people in the theater trying to,
See the baby.
brush this nude baby's butt away from their face, and just.
It's amazing, and you ought to see. Listen, I got an interesting story to tell you about this reinvention of Coming At You. So,
Right.
you can't believe the reaction of what happens with that picture. And these guys don't get it. Everything you're reading about 3D, and I wrote this down to read this back to you, because because I was thinking about, you know, a couple of things that I wanted to say to you. But they all talk about, if you read everything, even Cameron, they all talk about pulling you into the scene, which is true. I don't know if have you guys seen any of the new 3D stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm obsessed with it.
Depth of field is astounding, isn't it? Did you find the depth of field astounding?
Yeah, I thought it totally. I love the that they do create, kind of pull you into the environment. I love that movies are moving that way, but I also love the gimmicks too.
Yeah, but you see, they can't do with computerized or CGI or, you know, those kind of. They cannot get off the front wall of the screen.
Right.
You get it?
Yeah.
Now, when I finally got started doing this digital reinvention, what we do is we pull you into the scene, immersing you in the world. And at the same time, we reach out of the screen to entertain you. And the audience reaction is outrageous. It's like being at a live show.
Mm-hmm.
That's the coming at you noir 3D experience.
Yep.
See? There's a way to combine that if you have the tools and you know how to do it.
Yeah.
Now, what our original concept was, because you see, I want to ask you a simple question. Do you know why when you look at your TV you see an image? You got a black screen there and you turn on your TV and you see a picture. Do you have any idea how that happens?
It's
I'll bet you 90% of our audience doesn't know how that happens.
Like
why do you look at your TV?
The dots that are painted on like a certain frame rate or...
No.
Okay.
Make that 91%.
Yeah, 91.
Jason, you're a 3D freak, so why do you see just a flat image on your screen?
Because there's not two images of it. I mean,
why? What makes you see that picture, that moving image on your TV?
The way the light travels?
No.
I guess I don't.
It's a complete brain reaction. You know why?
Mm-mm.
The image is put over the airwaves and becomes pixels in your screen.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of little dots. Those dots activate your brain to see that picture. Got it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Think the audience understands that?
I think they do.
Okay. 3D is the same thing. We sit in a room, I'm sitting here talking to you, I see myself in the mirror over there, I see my wine on the other side, I see everything in dimension. My brain is attuned to seeing 3D dimension.
Yeah.
When you get to the theater making process, you have to induce the brain to come to see that flat image like it sees it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we did with the reinvention and with the technical difficulties we had taking a conventional over and under 3D system, which means your left eye is on the top of the frame and your right eye is on the bottom of the frame. So it's like looking at one picture with two frames.
Mm-hmm.
We had to take well, let me get back to that. But just to finish this, everything that happens with you seeing a 3D image is because of the brain.
Correct.
That's why when we throw an arrow at you, we make the audience feel the way we did it, not like a one-shot gimmick like they did. We made it a part of the sequence.
Mm-hmm.
so that you feel now, especially with the digital reinvention, my God, just you know how you look at the TV image before and then look at it in digital, the big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The minute we accomplished that, just getting us into digital, we gained that depth of field as a start.
Wow.
So that's 100% improvement over anything before. That's what's taken so long, because it's such a tedious thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we did it. We moved that top frame to the right down into the side-by-side frame in widescreen, because that picture's shot in widescreen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the full. I mean, it's really, really impressive on a big screen, especially. I mean, we redid the sound in Dolby 5.1, and
Nice.
we redid all the special effects and added special effects. We digitized it, our soundtrack. It's another film.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that ever saw this film before, they're going to see a new film now. Like